The Confessions of Saint Augustine, Book 10, Chapter 13. All these things I remember, and how I learnt them I remember. Many things also most falsely objected against them have I heard, and remember. Which though they be false, yet is it not false that I remember them. And I remember also that I have discerned betwixt those truths and these falsehoods objected to them. And I perceive that the present discerning of these things is different from remembering that I oftentimes discerned them when I often thought upon them. I both remember then to have often understood these things, and what I now discern and understand I lay up in my memory, that hereafter I may remember that I understand it now. So then I remember also to have remembered, as if hereafter I shall call to remembrance, that I have now been able to remember these things by the force of memory shall I call it to remembrance. Chapter 14. The same memory contains also the affections of my mind, not in the same manner that my mind itself contains them when it feels them, but far otherwise according to a power of its own. For without rejoicing I remember myself to have joyed, and without sorrow do I recollect my past sorrow. And that I once feared, I review without fear, and without desire call to mind the past desire. Sometimes, on the contrary, with joy do I remember my forepast sorrow, and with sorrow joy. Which is not wonderful as to the body, for mind is one thing, body another. If I therefore with joy remember some past pain of body, it is not so wonderful. But now seeing this very memory itself is mind. For when we give a thing in charge to be kept in memory, we say, see that you keep it in mind. And when we forget, we say, it did not come to my mind. And I slipped out of my mind. It slipped out of my mind, calling the memory itself the mind. This being so, how is it that, when with joy I remember my past sorrow, the mind has joy, the memory has sorrow, the mind upon the joyfulness which is in it is joyful, yet the memory upon the sadness which is in it is not sad? Does the memory perchance not belong to the mind? Who will say so? The memory then is, as it were, the belly of the mind, and joy and sadness, like sweet and bitter food, which when committed to the memory are, as it were, passed into the belly, where they may be stowed, but can't taste. Ridiculous it is to imagine these to be alike, and yet are they not utterly unlike? But behold, out of my memory I bring it, when I say there before perturbations of the mind, desire, joy, fear, sorrow, and whatsoever I can dispute thereon, by dividing each into its subordinate species, and by defining it, in my memory find I what to say, and thence do I bring it. Yet am I not disturbed by any of these perturbations, when by calling them to mind I remember them. Yea, and before I recalled and brought them back, they were there, and therefore could they by recollection thence be brought. Perchance then, as meat is by chewing the cud brought up out of the belly, so by recollection these out of the memory. Why then does not the disputer, thus recollecting, taste in the mouth of his musing the sweetness of joy, or the bitterness of sorrow? Is the comparison unlike in this, because not in all respects like? For who would willingly speak thereof, if so often as we name grief or fear, we should be compelled to be sad or fearful? And yet could we not speak of them? Did we not find in our memory not only the sounds of the names according to the images impressed by the senses of the body, but notions of the very things themselves which we never received by any avenue of the body, but which the mind itself perceiving by the experience of its own passions committed to the memory, or the memory of itself retained without being committed unto it?